Welcome to the podcast Era of AI with Rash. This is where we share resources and frameworks on how to work around AI in design, tech, and beyond. And today we have Wendy. Thank you so much for joining.
Thank you, Rash. Happy to be here.
Absolutely. So we'll be discussing on how a vibe coded application became live. And I think that's a very hot topic at the moment in 2026. In the beginning, so it'll be great to get your views of your journey, the honest opinion. But before we dive into that, it'll be great if you can introduce yourself to the listeners and tell us about your journey.
All right. So I'm Wendy. I've spent 14 years of my career dedicated in marketing, social media, and I'm originally from Amsterdam, relocated to Singapore 5 years ago. So my background is very heavy, rooted in social marketing and anything that happens online that goes viral, and that's cool. And in the past year and a half, I made a very deliberate choice to join an AI startup because I didn't want to be on the sidelines observing and talking about AI. I want to be in the middle of it, trying out myself. And now I'm at ChronoAI, where we build consumer apps with AI, but we also build infrastructures for AI builders. And yeah, that's me.
That's really interesting how you shifted from a marketing background. I would want to know, how did you come across AI and tech? And are there any milestones that you would like to share?
Yeah, so actually the shift isn't that big, right? Because I joined the company as marketing lead and now I'm the brand director. So I am leading and responsible for all our go-to-market, brand positioning, and all our marketing strategy. The only difference is before, from an agency side, I will cater to more traditional brands and company. I mostly work with Fortune 500 companies. So the difference is now I apply those skills and experience that I have for a startup. And that's really exciting. So it's a lot of starting from scratch, building from zero. And I've also learned how to create product based on audience feedback and based on community rather than create a product first and then try to launch it. So that's like one really interesting change and shift that I've experienced now in my the role that I have at ChronoAI as brand director. And it's been quite exciting to understand your audience, understand the community first, and then build a product around it. And because we use AI and because of the technology that we have, we're able to build, launch, deploy, and test really fast. As if you are in a more traditional company setting, especially a Fortune 500 company, everything has approval, everything has multiple layers of stakeholder. So by the time we launch a product or even a campaign, it might be 3 or 6 months down the road. And now we have built, test, and created so many different things in short amount of time. And that speed is definitely something new and something that I'm very, very excited about. I've been luckily invited as keynote speakers to a couple of conferences where I'm sharing these newfound knowledge with my fellow marketeers, fellow peers, and marketing leaders in the industry. Because I realized for the longest time, even today, a lot of marketing leaders and agencies, they're still thinking in a traditional sense how marketing works, very much from a one-way stream. We create a product, we create a campaign, then we try to create a strategy around it and creative around it, and then we launch, and then we hope it works. Where a lot of new generation startups, such as ChronoAI, we do it actually the other way around. We don't create a product until we have a product market fit. We don't create product and build features until we know that our seeding community actually wants it and there is a need for it.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I believe that within 5 minutes, you have explained how your role in the new era of AI has transformed. Within 7 months, you mentioned that from idea to executing and testing, that is something that you have already achieved, which is really fast and is transforming how we see marketing or how we see product in general. But moving ahead, it'll be great if we can expand a little bit on Soul Garden. If you can take us through the journey of the feature, like how the feature comes into being, what the app is about. If you can give us a little brief about the product.
Yes, of course. We, as a company, when I joined, right, we had only one product. When I joined, we were in the phase of, okay, what else can we do? And, with the speed at how AI tools are developing and innovating, that was at the time when Gemini launched Gemini Studio. You have all these vibe coding platforms. So I was really interested as a non-technical person coming in, right? Because we have a team of amazing developers, front end, back end. But as a layman person coming from marketing, non-technical, I don't understand what any of those means, and I think a lot of people can relate to that. So for me, it was a test to prove that even as a non-technical person in the age of AI that we're in right now, we can build and we can create as long you have that idea. And the thing that I keep on repeating is I firmly believe AI will replace jobs if all you do is jobs, and that means task. But one thing that AI cannot replace is vision, taste, and creativity. So I want to put that to test. So I think Gemini just launched a new version. So I wanted to try out Gemini Studio. And personally, I'm a manifestation girly, right? Like I do my manifestations. I eat my grapes every new year under the table. I do my daily affirmations. But I'm also a person with ADHD. So I get really overwhelmed, right? Like the manifestation community is all about you wake up early, you're writing your notes, you do meditation, you do this and that. And it just becomes like this whole to-do list on top of living a life. So as an ADHD girl who is into manifestation, I was looking into manifestation app that we currently have. And all of them are either very just unattractive to look at or very lengthy, feels like another to do. And if it takes a lot of effort, I'm the type of person that I get easily distracted. So it won't become a habit. I won't do it. So one day when I was taking care of my plants and I was like, doing my manifestation in my head, all the traditional things as girlies wish for. I want to be hot, rich, and successful, right? And I was like watering my plant. And I had a thought in my head and I said, manifestation is actually growing a plant. You're planting an intention. And the affirmation is basically a water that you have to water, just like a plant, you need to water daily to see it grow. And I thought instantly, I was like, that's actually a great app idea. I don't want to write notes. I don't want to do those meditation exercises. That just feels boring. So that's how I came up with the idea of Soul Garden. So basically, the feature is quite simple. You plant an intention. You type anything that you want in any language that you want, because that's also something I struggle with. I used AI to write my manifestation because usually those manifestation needs to sound very poetic and beautiful. And most of us, I don't know about other people, but I'm not that creative in the sense I can write poetic terms. So what the app does is you plan your intention, you type in something very simple. For example, I want to be rich. And then the AI will poeticify it and make it into a beautiful intention manifestation. And then you can regenerate it until you're happy with it. And then if you're happy with that manifestation, then you can plant it as a seed. And then AI will generate it into a beautiful seed that is unique to your manifestation. And then every day you come back to the app and you water it. And if you water it 3 times, it will then grow. So the seed goes to a sprout and sprout goes into a plant. And then it goes into a fully growth, like a full growth phase. And I am also a millennial that used to collect Pokemon cards. So I also put in a feature that you can collect all your past plants into a encyclopedia, look back to all your manifestations, and you can see all the plants that you generated. So it's quite fun. I think it's just like how I'm describing it right now, ADHD girl, creative idea all over the place. This is how I briefed my AI, Gemini Studio. And it was able to put that into a product. That's, regardless of the app, what really, really excites me is if you have a impulsive 3 a.m. idea, any of us, how technical or non-technical you are, you can drop in your favorite AI and see it come into a product. And to me, that is so exciting. And just think about all the opportunities and all of the options that we can do as a creative person.
Mm-hmm. Makes sense. I really love the fact that it's an original idea coming into being with the power of technology, rightly mentioned by you, and the originality of it. I love how you were just watering your plants, and I got that idea, and AI helped you spark that idea into a product very quickly so that you can act upon it. And from here, I have like two stemming questions. Probably I'll ask you the first one. As a product designer and also a manifestation girly that I am, I see a lot of applications out there. They are either boring or they're not as engaging for me to stay on to it, like how you mentioned as well. You mentioned specific principles that I feel like would work in terms of user engagement. But if you were to expand, what was your brain behind it? What was the gamification or user engagement principle that you wanted to make sure that Soul Garden has, so that it's not boring or it's not something, it keeps the people engaged and kept on using it? If there's a principle in terms of design or human psychology that you would want to expand on.
Thank you, Raj. That's a great question. And I think that's where my marketing DNA comes in place, right? I'm a firm believer of any great ideas or even brilliant idea stays as an idea. If you don't test it, if you don't involve your audience, if you don't get feedback. So when I came up with the idea and I made a very simple demo, the first thing I did was show it to my team. We were in that phase where there's no judgment, no shame, and we all were just vibe coding and playing around. And that environment created a lot of interesting product. So I tested and shared it with my team. And then I got, the next step that we did was the initial feedback. So everyone said, oh, it's really fun. And I think we could go to the next step. Then my marketing professional DNA comes in place. Then I create a really specific test and go to market time plan, right? Because now we are going to test it and we're going to do it exactly as according to the book. So phase one was an internal feedback. We created a feedback form to share across internally within our team, but also internally within our friends and family, and get really brutal, honest feedback. And if the feedback was below 80% positive, that means the idea was only good in my head. It doesn't mean anything. But luckily, we got 80% positive feedback. So that means, okay, there's something there. So then the next step is I created a really detailed go to market plan in phases. So from demo to MVP to version one on testnet to mainnet and then to soft launch, hard launch, and then create an entire marketing plan on market position, product position, what is our USP, what is our value, what, problem are we solving, what community are we tapping into. And what we also actively did before we launched anything was to joining on the existing Reddit community. So on Reddit you have a lot of manifestation communities, and we shared, right? Like, I think a lot of big brands, they are afraid to show work in progress. We're not. So we literally just shared the very ugly back then version of Gemini Studio with screenshot ideas on Reddit and asked the manifestation communities to give us feedback. And we got some really great insight and feedback. A lot of them are positive. So that gave us more ideas to put into the first version. And then obviously, because I vibe coded, the aesthetic side of it isn't quite there, but I knew exactly how I wanted to look. So I worked very closely with our head of design, and he's amazing. So he and I, we're on the same wavelength of creativity. So I would show him, this is how my app look like right now. This is the Pinterest mood board of what I wanted to look and feel like. And then he will be like, I got you, girl. And then really did a full makeover in terms of the front end look and feel. So I'm really well aware that I'm in a very unique position and very privileged position. Whereas a non-technical person, I can vibe code an idea. But with me in my company, I have front end, back end developers that can actually deploy and launch the app for me. I have a UI designer who can actually beautify and make over my app to look at exactly the way I do. I want it to look like. And myself, I have a full marketing team where we can create an entire go to market strategy. So that's the luxury position we're in. So why not test it out? Right. And that's how we were able to go from Vibe to deploy to launch and on App Store all within 4 weeks.
Interesting. And I really like how to make sure that the app is engaging. You did actual user testing and feedback and iterated the further roadmaps accordingly, along with the team that you mentioned. I think it's a 360 solid outlook of how to bring your idea into being with the team and also collaborating. The second thing I wanted to ask when you were describing Soul Garden and the whole feature, I want to know how does AI make a user experience better in the app? And manifestations, self care, and meditation apps are very personal to human beings. How do you make AI sound more human and not very robotic in your application?
Yeah, I think in the end, it's in the hand of the creator, the prompter, right? So far, the feedback we gotten was that it feels super personal and it's really fun and easy to play. So this is our landing page. Right. And I really wanted to make sure that even though the app itself is only available on the App Store, I really wanted to make sure that we have a landing page that can tell our users what Soul Garden is about. So the tone of voice, the way it speaks, it's all very personal to me. That's how I speak, right? Outside of a corporate environment. And that's how I know the manifestation community speaks. It's very, where the Lulu is the Sululu, but it's giving Elle Woods, Legally Blonde. It's giving Lizzie McGuire. It's an app for the girlies. And I have my developers and front end developers telling me while they were helping me deploying, launching it, they literally said, Wendy, you know what? I'm not the target audience. I have no idea what this app is about. And they literally said, like, there's no one else that could have designed and came up with this app but you. So the way to avoid your app, whatever you're creating, sounds too generic. I think the number one thing is to really look within yourself. Is it true to you? Is it your personality? Is it solving a problem that you want to solve? I'm a firm believer that you can create the best product if you are your own ICP. If you're trying to tap into a community that you don't know anything about, then it will always feel a little bit robotic and a little bit inauthentic. So that's how we came to the tone of voice. And then AI, we use AI tools to help us to really narrow it down and create our strategy based on existing communities, existing threads on Reddit, existing topics on TikTok, because that's where our communities are at and what are they talking about and what's the tone of voice that they use. So here you can see the steps, right? It's very simple. You plant, you water. While you're watering, you can read out loud your daily affirmation with intent. So it gives you a moment, a break from doom scrolling. The way to water is you have to hold the water button. So, like when you're holding it, you can't scroll and do other things. So it really helps me as an ADHD person to force me to focus for that 5 seconds even. And then it will bloom. And the feedback we gotten was it really feels like a blind box. When those Pop Mart blind box was very popular, you don't know what you're getting. And that's the part that AI does so well that human cannot generate. If this app was entirely made by a human design team, then the final plant will be limited. At some point, you're going to have duplicated. So that's where the power of AI comes in. It will generate based on your own prompt, and your prompt is your manifestation, and it creates something totally unique to you. And it makes really fun for users to collect them, to share them with their friends. When we were testing internally, our company internal chat was full with screenshots of, oh, I got this plant, which did you got? And people were sharing all of the creations that their Soul Garden generated. So that's been really, really fun. And then I can show some of the screen recordings, the screenshots of how the app looks like. So it's very girly, it's very cute, it's very just happy. And I really believe, personally, I use it now daily. From a selfish perspective, I think the best, maybe some of the best product are created by creators who just want something for themselves that weren't out there on the market. So if you don't want to create anything that's too generic and you don't want to create anything that sounds too robotic, it definitely needs to come from a sense that is your personality, your passion, and you something that you miss, right?
Mhm.
Okay.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing this little glance of the product. Gives our listeners a little glance into your idea and what you're trying to describe, which I think it's very important that you mentioned. The taste is so important in the world where everything is being generated by AI. And I really like how you connected with your own personal experience and your own knowledge, and rightly said that this is something that will give people a chance to also make their own personal ideas coming into being. So it's all about making it personal and making it human. It'll be great if we get to know more about the tools that you used to make this into being. And is there any kind of learnings that you had on the way?
Yes. So my tech stack is I use Gemini Studio to vibe code. And hindsight, I wouldn't recommend to use Gemini Studio because the feedback I got, as a non-technical person, I'm also learning as I'm building. The feedback I got was that Gemini Studio only creates landing pages. So it took them a lot of work actually to package it into GitHub and make it into a mobile app. So if anyone is vibe coding these days, there's so much better AI tools out there that already creates in a mobile app format. So that would be my number one tip. I think Claude Code these days are doing amazing things. And then I use Cursor. So Cursor tap into multiple agents, and Cursor really helps us to create the go-to-market plan and also translate the feedback that we have collected into actual features and actionable implementations and next step. And we also use Cursor linked with Remotion to update the design, update the look and feel. Yeah, I think there's so many different AI tools. There's no one size fits all. I'm always speaking from a girl perspective. I think what AI tool you use is as personal as your skincare. There's a foundation, but for everyone, it's very different. I'm used to working with Cursor and these days Claude co-work, but some of my developers, they love Codex and they swear by Midjourney. And, there's no point in adapting someone else's tech workflow entirely if that's not something that you're comfortable with. So find your own that you find it easy to use. And I think the biggest challenge is not vibe coding. That's something that we discovered. Everyone can vibe code and working app within, any platform that they choose. But the challenge is how do you deploy and launch? And then another challenge that we faced is how do you get AppStore to approve it? Because Apple has gotten more and more strict on approving apps. We also, before this, created a horoscope astrology app that we felt very, very passionate about, but it was declined by Apple because it violated their 4.3 guideline, which is basically comes down to there are too many astrology apps on App Store. So we're not allowed to create another astrology app.
That is actually a question I wanted to ask. Maybe you can answer this. So, but you gave a really nice roadmap of how from vibe coding to launching. But in the middle, like how you just started describing, I would love to know what were the constraints, what were the technical constraints that you faced while deploying it, and even how was your journey like? One thing that you mentioned that it's really hard for App Store to approve. So, what's the harsh reality that you would like to express, the honest side of things?
Yes. So the challenge from my perspective as a non-technical person from vibe coding to actually deploying is I learned there's actually still a lot of technical steps in there. I think these days it's easier and I've seen a lot of creators online sharing their journey using multiple platforms like Vercel, GitHub to launch it. So that is a step that if you're non-technical and you want to build this from begin till end, you need to figure out. However, you could just ask your Claude or ask your AI how to do it. They will give you step by step. That part is still quite challenging, and I've tried to figure out and learn myself. Luckily, I do have developers with me that show me and teaches me these things. So I would recommend use platforms and services that are already out there that can help you make that process easier. And that's why I mentioned before, I wouldn't recommend use Gemini Studio to vibe coder app because that turns out to be very hard to package. So use a vibe coded app platform that already creates in mobile form. So that's one. And the second is once you do have a package and you can deploy and you can launch, a challenge we faced with our previous apps was get AppStore to approve. But because we had those learnings, I already know all of the restricted categories, restricted words. So what App Store really are looking for is they want apps that can add value because they don't want, which I understand, they don't want their App Store to be over flooded with spam apps. So you need to create something that's unique and that adds value. And because we had all those learnings, I was able to use Cursor to really narrow down our product. So we were using Cursor and market research. We were able to really nail down on the product details. So what is your core product? What is your value proposition? What is our unique selling point? What is our main feature functionality to the gritty details, and then we translate that into our App Store description. And Apple really value and look at, is your app going to be adding some sort of value or positive impact to their users? And because we know all of these details of the previous time that we were rejected, we were able to implement, and actually Soul Garden got approved first time. Yes, and the only first time they didn't decline, but it came back with one feedback is we had a paid feature in there and they want the paid feature interface to look specifically according to their guideline. So I would recommend if you're building, ask your AI to screen and review all App Store guidelines. It's all in there. You don't need to read it yourself, and make sure everything that you create fits those guidelines. And just submit, right? I think the best way to learn is submit multiple apps, and then the feedback you get that you can feedback to your AI, and then you can create an internal database of what App Store is looking for so that every other app that you create can get approved really fast. And that's how we build that database, knowing exactly what Apple is looking at, what gets declined, what are the things that they will stop them from approving your app.
Interesting. Thank you so much for sharing that, because that's gold knowledge. That is something that'll help the listeners a lot to make sure that their ideas are being deployed and actually being accepted by the App Store.
Yeah, so it's not a checklist. So it's a public link. What you could do is you drop that link into whatever AI agent you are using to build. Ask your agents to review the full guidelines and then rewrite and edit your App Store descriptions and edit your app features. So use that as a last part of a check.
Like a constraint so that you get the results accordingly, correct? It sounds like there have been many technical constraints, not just in terms of what App Store is accepting, but what is developable, what is designed. There's a lot of things going on. So from your side, if you were to name three things that were the trade-off that you had to accept in this product, what would they be?
So I think the only constraint so far in Soul Garden and any other app that we're building, I really don't take no for an answer. I'm a firm believer of, maybe I'm overly optimistic, I'm a manifestation girly, so we are delusional. So I'm a firm believer of that are always more solutions than problems.
That was lovely. Thank you so much for sharing that. And I'm pretty sure that sounds like a interesting journey from different countries, something that I can truly relate to as well. But here comes the end of this podcast, and I really want to thank you for sharing your knowledge, your journey with Soul Garden. It's an interesting app. I would love if listeners can also try to use it and share what they feel like. But it's from a design or a product perspective, I would really want to thank you for showing us the side that in today's world where AI is building anything and everything, human psychology, building with intention is very important. So I think that's one takeaway that I'm taking from this conversation with you. And thank you so much again for joining me. So, that being said, we'll share all the resources that Wendy and I discussed, along with tools, any frameworks that the Soul Garden or Chrono AI has to share in the captions here. And I will see the listeners in the next episode. Thank you so much.